Welcome to another Microgreens episode on my channel. If this is your first time on my channel, consider subscribing if you like what you are about to see. And let's get started. Today, I have brought my live digital audience for you to hear, applaud, and my live digital band. So today we are going to be harvesting a 10-20 tray of China Rose radish. This is an excellent tray of radish. It's a little bit short over here because that's where the fan was kind of blowing on it and it dried up a little bit this end, but it's still pretty good. And we're going to go ahead and harvest that up today and see how we did. How much do you think is in this tray? Just guessing. Post a comment in the description how much you think there is. I'm guessing that there'll be 16 ounces per pound that we get out of this tray. So for every pound, 16 ounces. And that's what I think we're going to get, about 16 ounces. So let's get started with harvesting this up. I've got my Gen Pack clamshells. I know there's a big movement going on to get rid of plastic. I hear that every one of my videos, somebody comments, that's great, get rid of the plastic, stop doing that. Haven't heard a lot of solutions though. To keep them fresh, these will stay fresh for like 2 to 3 weeks refrigerated in one of these plastic clamshells. These are made by Gen Pack. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. You can buy them from Amazon. And they are 16 fluid ounce clamshells. They hold perfectly 2 ounces of microgreens. Doesn't seem to matter what they are. They can be amaranth, something really fine, or something really big like a pea shoot. You can get 2 ounces in one of these containers very well. So we'll start off with some of the smaller stuff on the end here. One thing I like to do is, being a small farmer of microgreens, I don't have to deal with a whole ton of this, is I will take the time to cut a handful like this, and then I take and I actually rub my finger on the bottom and I try to get out any of the smaller microgreens that are just not very big, that just didn't look very great, and I kind of sort them out a little bit. You don't have to spend a ton of time doing that, and it's a little bit rougher on the end that dried up because you could have some microgreens that are maybe not great in there. But when I get to the bigger stuff here coming up really soon, you won't have to worry about that. You can just pretty much cut and package. I like to keep a paper towel handy. Occasionally I will wipe my scissors down. Some people like to use a knife for harvesting. I like the scissors. I just like the control of like one handful at a time. I'm slow. It doesn't bother me that much. And every now and then I wipe down my scissors. I always sterilize my scissors every time I harvest along with my hands. I wash them down with bleach. Some people aren't really crazy about bleach. You're welcome to wear latex gloves if you would like. You can use hydrogen peroxide if you want to use that to sterilize instead of bleach. I personally have no problem using the bleach, and I'm not as much of a fanatic of that your hands should never touch the microgreens. I keep everything really clean, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes people go really overboard and think hands should never touch food. Like, oh my God, your hands touched food, now they're tainted forever. You might want to go look at what's going on in your restaurant if that bothers you a lot, because you probably won't eat at restaurants anymore, because I've never seen a chef, sous chef, anybody wearing gloves. Like, they're handling your food. It's all about making sure that you don't get things on your hands that shouldn't be there. Like, you know, if you're going to use the bathroom, wash your hands. That's why it says it. Everywhere you go, if you're an employee, you must wash your hands. They don't say, if you're an employee, you must change your gloves. Like, because you went to the bathroom, put on new gloves. I guess you could say in a way that's a sort of a pet peeve of mine, that people get so hung up on, that you should never be touching the microgreens. Yeah, if you went to the bathroom and didn't wash your hands after, and you're not being very sanitary, then yeah, I don't want you touching my microgreens either. So these are getting a little bit nicer now. We're getting into the stuff that's a little bit bigger. Really, really nice crop here. I would have probably normally harvested these yesterday. I actually intended to do that yesterday, but just didn't get around to it. By the time I was done harvesting all my other crops yesterday, I just wasn't into it anymore. It was time to sit down with the wife and watch some TV. Currently watching the second season of Lost in Space. If you haven't seen Lost in Space, check it out. It's on Amazon. Zero that out. .2 ounces. That's close enough for me. A couple little extra seed holes here that I'm not a fanatic about getting rid of them, but if I see them, then I take them off. All right, that's container number 1 in the books. All right, let's give the band a chance to play some music while I harvest up some of this. We'll go a little bit fast so you don't have to watch me forever. And let's get started. So as I'm going, another thing you might notice is that I like to, it's kind of my own thing, you don't have to do it this way, but I like to lay out my microgreens with the greens at one end. So there'll be one handful where I lay them out one end like that. And then on my next handful of microgreens, I will simply just lay them out the opposite way. And I just do that back and forth as I go. And you end up with a really nice package. I do that because you end up with some really nice looking ends on both ends, and it's not going to be just like one-sided looking full. It makes the whole package nice and full, and you get, you know, some really nice color in the bottom. So I'm going to take a minute and bring up the most popular question I still get on microgreens. I've had this question on almost every single video I've ever made. What are the licensing requirements? What are all the food regulations? I've covered this in many videos, but I still get asked about it all the time. Like, what's required to legally sell microgreens? And I'm going to tell you that what I always tell people, like, everywhere you go, they're going to have different rules and regulations. I think you'll find, though, most places have essentially no rules around growing small amounts of produce for sale. If you were a big commercial company in New Hampshire making more than $20,000 a year, that's when things come into play on regulations. But if you were just starting out, selling $20,000 a year of microgreens, it might take you a little while to get there. If you find yourself there, then yeah, you're probably going to start wanting to look into what it's going to take to continue on and get bigger. But up until you're at that point, at least in New Hampshire, there's not a whole lot you have to worry about. Now, when it comes to selling to restaurants, New Hampshire's terminology is really kind of interesting. Like, what it is you fall under a food cottage law. But nowhere in the food cottage law do they mention raw produce. And nowhere in the Department of Agriculture do they mention raw produce. So it's kind of hard to figure out. So when you're going through it, they talk about non-potentially hazard food products is what they're worried about if you're less than $20,000. When you start getting into potentially hazard food products, that's when things change. Well, everything on there is things that you would bake. Cookies, breads, things you're going to cook in your home. They never mention produce. Produce obviously is going to be non-potentially hazardous. It's by nature, it's not hazardous. I mean, if you tainted it somehow, then yeah, it's going to become hazardous. But that goes with anything. I mean, it could be water, it could be potentially hazardous if you didn't treat it properly. So looking into that is kind of a challenge. It might be why people ask me all the time for the answer to it, is because they can't find the answer either. But what I always do is I tell people, go check with your local Department of Agriculture. They will have a website, and you will be able to go there and research all the rules and regulations for the Department of Agriculture. I tend to go a little bit of the way of sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, or something like that. If you can't find a rule that applies to what you're doing, maybe you don't want to ask, because maybe you're not even on their radar. And once you ask, all of a sudden they find out they don't know what the rules are either, so they put you in some crazy category just to make sure that you're under some sort of regulation, because they want to make sure everybody's regulated at some level. There's a lot of people that don't even know that microgreens and sprouts are two completely different products. They're not even close to the same thing. I see it all the time on Facebook where people reference microgreens as sprouts, and they should not do that. Sprouts have a bad name because they have had issues where they've had contamination, they've had E. coli or salmonella, and that's because sprouts are grown all in like one compact jar or whatever container you're using, and they're all in there sharing the same water. You eat the entire product, the roots, everything, and if one little seed had the smallest amount of salmonella or E. coli or whatever, the whole batch is contaminated. And so you can get very sick from that. Microgreens are very different in that you harvest them above the soil line. You're not eating the roots. They're not all soaked in the same solution. And when they are soaked in the same solution, you're actually doing that to sterilize them intentionally. So you would soak them in a solution that has like hydrogen peroxide in them or something like that. Usually it's hydrogen peroxide, food grade, to really sterilize the seeds. I get all my seeds through True Leaf Market. They're all 4 microgreens. They're not any different than any other seed though. They're regular seeds, but they're all safe. They're not tainted seeds. I'm not buying crap seeds. Generally, the seeds that you get through True Leaf Market that they sell for microgreens are also made for sprouting, so they're a safe seed to use. That's where sprouts and microgreens, totally different product. I can go on and on and on about that. So I'm gonna really stuff this container because I've got like a handful left here. Got one albino here. Instead of putting him in the package, I'll just eat him. The albinos don't really look that good in the package. It makes it look like your product is yellowing at the end of its life. So this will be a very heavy package because of going over, or because I had just a little bit left, so I had to fill it up. Yeah, 2.75. Yeah, so regulatory, I think it's like this in most business. If you're just starting out and you're small, you're not making over $20,000 a year or whatever your state permits, and you can't find the rules about it, my suggestion is to not really push the issue. If you're selling at a farmer's market, they're going to have rules. They're going to tell you like what you have to have. Usually it's GAP certification, like good agricultural practices, which is pretty easy to go through. They're just making sure that you keep everything clean, you've got a place to wash things, that you have somewhere like a cold storage area for cold things. It's really just basic stuff, you know, sterilizing your equipment, your scissors or whatever you're using, washing your hands all the time, basic stuff. So what do we end up with here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 packages. So we got 14 ounces, and that's not quite a pound, but every one of these I overstuffed. The top one is 2.75 ounces. Most of them are 2.2 ounces. And so I ended up pretty close to that 16 ounces or a pound that I guessed on. So I'm good with that. These will go in the refrigerator. I have a small refrigerator dedicated just to my microgreens. And these are what my labels look like. If you're interested in learning how to make my labels, these are on just Avery paper, or label paper. And I just print them myself. You can have them made for you, or you can just make your own. I make my own, I print them myself. I don't go through, you know, thousands of labels a week, so it's not a big deal for me to just make my own. And then these will get labeled, and they will be off to restaurants and my retail locations. I hope you enjoyed watching me harvest this tray while I tried giving you whatever tips I could think of as I went along. I just wing it, so if it was valuable information, great. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. If you like my videos, consider subscribing. Hit the little bell if you want notifications. If you don't want to subscribe, that's fine. I appreciate you for watching the video this far. Thanks.